Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about it seemed really cool to me. It wasn't until I was 13 that my mom finally let me. She told me to wear my helmet, have my phone, take a flashlight, and she set parameters for me where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which was a lot to me. So right after the sun set, I was off. I loved it. There were no people out walking their dogs, no kids running around, the temperature was perfect, etc. It was really fun. So fun that I ignored the limits my mom set. You see, where I was biking was a lot of walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas between 2 neighborhoods. There's this long path that went at least 600 feet at a 25-degree angle. I was flying down this hill, having an absolute blast, and darted right through my parameters. My mom set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to houses and people. The outside, more specifically, the place where the path I was on led to, was barren. I rode along this path for 10 minutes before I could only see some of the lights of the houses on the inside of the limits. After 15 minutes of riding along this dirt path, I hear singing. It sounded about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. I stopped riding to hear it better. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby, but she wasn't singing the words, just the melody of the vocals. Her voice was strange. You know how when you have a phlegm in your throat, your voice gets scratchy? That's what her voice sounded like. I inch in forward to try to see her. I get close enough to see the silhouette of her hair bouncing up and down, like she was bobbing her head. I decide to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking that maybe this person is in need of help or something. Or maybe this is an insane person and the light will scare them away. So I take the flashlight out of my backpack, point it at her, and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be sticking together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped off too. She was wearing a very oversized bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too. I conjured up as much bravery as I could and said, "Sorry," in a very, "oops, this is the wrong room" kind of way. She didn't respond. I turned off the flashlight and put it back in my pocket. Just as I was turning my bike around, she screams. She screams in an awful, high-pitched voice. I damn near shit myself as I throw myself back onto my bike and I hear her voice getting closer to me. I book it as fast as I can. I don't look behind me and I don't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until it dissolved into the howling of the wind. Lastly is the story of Junko Furuta, a girl who was held captive by 4 boys for 44 days. The parents of the boy at whose house the girl was kept both worked and were rarely home. There was domestic violence involved and the parents were scared of their son. The second-floor room of the house had been turned into a meeting place of sorts for the son and his no-good friends, and the door was apparently always locked. The boys would get in by climbing a nearby electricity pole. It came to light that before the abduction, one of the boys deliberately ran into her with their motorcycle, and one of the other boys offered to help her while she was still in her woozy state post-crash. When they took Junko, they first raped her. They took her to the second floor and imprisoned her. She was subjected to gang rape, having pins stuck in her, being burned with matches and cigarettes and other foreign objects inserted inside her. She was made to dance naked and masturbate, made to smoke multiple cigarettes at a time. She sniffed paint thinner and had iron bars dropped on her stomach from heights of over 5 feet. She was made to pee in a cup and then drink it, was hit in the thighs repeatedly with iron bars with balls on it weighing over 1.5 kilograms. She was punched and kicked, and you can imagine. Junko became covered in blood, and her face swelled up to where it was impossible to tell where her eyes were. One of the boys taunted her for having a big, ugly face. They repeatedly poured lighter fluid on her legs and lit it, left her out on the balcony naked in the middle of winter, dropped hot wax on her face, and more, for over 40 days. And it gets worse. The parents of the house knew that Junko was there. On one occasion, they brought her downstairs, gave her dinner, and told her to go home quickly. She was caught by one of the boys and returned to the house before she could reach her home. God forbid they accompany her. It is unclear at what point in her imprisonment this occurred. By the time Junko died, she was unable to stand on her own volition and could barely move. One of the boys, or all of them, lost money gambling and decided to take it out on her. She was beaten for over 2 hours. They burned her legs with lighter fluid, hit her with iron bars, and at some point during this, she finally died. Upon realizing she was dead, they wrapped Junko's body with a blanket, stuffed her into a travel bag, and put the bag into a metal drum, which they then filled with concrete and buried in what at the time was a vacant lot and is now Wakasu Seaside Park in Tokyo. This happened on the 4th of January 1989. On the 29th of March of the same year, one of the boys was arrested for something else and confessed to Junko's abduction, torture, and murder, and implicated the other 3 boys in the case. Junko was only 17. And her abusers were also minors, but due to the gravity of the case, they were tried as adults, which you can find out all about in the link I've provided in the description. Whoa, it was like too heavy.